On the broadcast tonight, Tokyo announces the results of its review of a document that was meant to settle the issue of comfort women back in 1993. Well, it's dealing a heavy blow to already tense relations between Seoul and Tokyo. Korea is leaning towards liberalizing the nation's very sensitive rice market. It was made official by the government today, and we have the details. The U.S. will send up to 300 military advisors to Iraq to help its struggling security forces fend off a wave of Sunni militants. Is the U.S. edging back into a conflict that Mr. Obama once thought he had left behind? And World Cup at a glance. Cameroon and Uruguay come out as winners, but no winner emerges from the Japan-Greece match. We have a snapshot of Day 8 of the World Cup and the matches to look forward to this weekend. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It's 5 a.m. in New York, 5 p.m. or a.m. in Cuyaba as well, and 6 p.m. on Friday, the 20th of June here in Seoul. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel with the chat. Thank you for joining us. Now, the Japanese government has released a result of its review of the so-called Kono statement to Japanese lawmakers. And for the latest, let's connect live to our foreign affairs correspondent, Hwang Sung-hee at Seoul's Foreign Ministry.
Now, Sung-hee, what can you tell us at this point?
Well, guys, the results of a government-conducted review on the Kono statement was submitted at a House of Representatives Budget Committee meeting earlier on this Friday afternoon. The statement was issued back in 1993 by then Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono, and it acknowledged for the very first time the forced sexual enslavement of women by the Japanese military. More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military in comfort stations during the Second World War. In February, the Japanese government formed an inspection team with 5 members consisting of lawyers and experts to re-examine how the statement was put together. According to Japanese media, the report released today claims the Korean government played a role in the text of the Kono statement through discussion. The report says Seoul and Tokyo agreed to keep their dealings a secret. In addition, it also claims the Japanese government did not verify the validity of testimonies given by 16 Korean comfort women, which were the basis of the Kono statement.
Now, Sung-hee, we were expecting this, the latest out of Tokyo to intensify the intense relations between Seoul and Tokyo. How is the South Korean government reacting to this?
Well, Kanyang, Seoul has not given an official statement on the report yet, but it is expected to draw heavy criticism from South Korea. Before the report was actually released, Japanese media reported on these possible under-the-table dealings between Seoul and Tokyo. Then the South Korean government lashed out, saying the statement was made on Japan's own accord. South Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yong will be visiting Washington next Tuesday for talks with its U.S. Deputy Secretary of State William Burns. And Cho is expected to raise the re-examination results and express concerns that Japan's ongoing denial of its historical wrongdoings is badly damaging regional stability. Guys?
Well, frustrating updates, but nonetheless, thank you, Sung-hee, and do keep us updated as the story develops.
That was our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee live from the Foreign Ministry here in Seoul. Now, Japan stands in great contrast to Germany when it comes to handling its wartime atrocities. Almost 70 years after the end of World War II, German authorities this week tracked down a former Nazi who had been living in the United States for decades.
And our Kwon So-ah tells us the 89-year-old will likely be extradited to Germany to answer to the long-standing charges against him.
Nearly 70 years have passed since the Second World War ended. 89-year-old Johann Breyer was 17 when he joined the Nazi military as a guard, and for the past 6 decades has been living in the United States. But this week, Breyer was arrested in Philadelphia upon Germany's request on charges of having aided in the killing of 216,000 German, Hungarian, and Czechoslovakian Jews in Auschwitz.
His guarding in the Death's Head battalion that he belonged to made it possible for those killings.
There's a good chance that Breyer will now be turned over to Germany, as the U.S. has an extradition treaty with the country. 10 years ago, a U.S. court ruled that Breyer was not responsible for his acts during World War II because he was so young when he joined the Nazis. Breyer, who has been living in the States since the 1950s, has claimed he was forced to carry out the heinous acts. Despite that, Germany never stopped looking for evidence and recently found out that Breyer had received several awards for his active participation in the genocide of Jews. Germany's persistence in punishing those responsible for past wrongdoings continues to gain attention here in Korea, as it stands in stark contrast to Japan's attitude towards its past atrocities. Japanese authorities have done little to nothing to compensate or apologize to the women that were forced into sexual slavery by Japanese troops in the early 20th century. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Back here in this country, President Park Geun-hye's cabinet reshuffle this month was a chance to hit the reset button for an administration partly blamed for April's Seoul ferry disaster. But things have not gone according to plan. And on the last day of a parliamentary interpellation session on Friday, lawmakers asked why. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
President Park Geun-hye's cabinet reshuffle is stuck in first gear. First, there were the controversy surrounding her 2 picks for prime minister, the first of which had to step aside. Now her selection for education minister Kim Myung-soo is embattled, accused of plagiarizing a dissertation written by one of his students while acting as a professor.
Why do scandals endlessly pop up for high-level nominees of important governmental posts?
It's hard to say, as people have different standards when judging a suitable candidate. Some put the emphasis on morality, others look at one's capabilities to execute tasks. We must abide by what the general public can accept.
Opposition party lawmakers during Friday's hearing also raised concerns about Kim's conservative stance on historical and educational issues, saying it could set the stage for clashes with liberal school superintendents who were elected in the June 4th local elections. As for the nation's current education ministers, Heo Nam-soo answered questions about the direction of education in Korea.
Korea needs a paradigm shift in education. How should it change?
In the wake of the Seoul ferry disaster, we need to raise awareness of safety. We also need to foster an environment where education is not just focused on passing college entrance exams, but also cultivating personalities.
The education minister said the government was doing all it can to reduce class sizes and encourage schools to promote more extracurricular activities. Lawmakers said Korea's future lies in how well we educate our children, and that education should not be swayed by political ideologies. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, the Korean government is leaning heavily towards a liberalization of its rice market, nudged by a move out of the Philippines. The World Trade Organization on Thursday gave Manila a 5-year extension on a waiver to open its rice market, but local officials here say it came at a very steep cost, with mandatory imports more than doubling. Now, if Korea wants to avoid finding itself in a similar situation, this country, whose rice consumption relies almost completely on domestic produce, would have to open up its rice market. Well, Korea was allowed to delay liberalization back in 1993 and then again in 2004, but that agreement is set to expire at the end of this year. Deputy Agriculture Minister Lee Jun-won said the case out of the Philippines should stand as a lesson for South Korea and suggested a change was coming. The government says a final decision will come by the end of this month.
The U.S. is stepping into Iraq once again, but this time a little differently. President Obama is sending a substantial group of military personnel to Iraq, but they won't be on the front lines. He has ordered some 300 military advisors to back up Iraqi security personnel in their fight against ISIL militants. Here's our Connie Lee with the story.
Washington is extending a much-needed helping hand to Iraq. The U.S. has decided to send about 300 military advisors to help Iraqi troops fight off insurgents. This nearly 3 years after President Barack Obama pulled the last U.S. troops out of the country. President Obama made it clear, though, that the help this time around will not be in combat.
American forces will not be returning to combat in Iraq, but we will help Iraqis as they take the fight to terrorists who threaten the Iraqi people, the region.
In a briefing at the White House on Thursday, Obama also stressed the need for Iraq's government to be more inclusive.
It is clear, though, that only leaders that can govern with an inclusive agenda are going to be able to truly bring the Iraqi people together and help them through this crisis. Meanwhile, the United States will not pursue military options that support one sect inside of Iraq at the expense of another.
He added that the U.S. is not in position to choose Iraq's leaders. But citing support from the U.S., some political leaders in Iraq are calling for the prime minister to be replaced. Nouri al-Maliki has come under fire for his sectarian policies, favoring Shiite interests, and is widely blamed for the spiraling Sunni insurgency. The insurgents, called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or the ISIL, are now in control of many of Iraq's northern cities. And the ISIL, now eyeing Baghdad, poses the greatest threat to Iraq's security since the U.S.-led invasion back in 2003. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Well, day 8 of the 2014 FIFA World Cup saw 2 more groups move into their second round of matches, with Colombia dispatching Cote d'Ivoire 2-1 early on.
And Japan and Greece fought out a rather pointless game because neither side scored, while Uruguay defeated England to leave the European side on the brink of elimination.
For all of the day's biggest winners and losers, and for what to look ahead this weekend, let's go to our sports correspondent Song Ji-sun. Ji-sun, happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday, everyone. The good thing about the weekend is that we can now watch the World Cup games morning or night without worrying too much about how we'll make it to work the very next day. In Thursday's action, Uruguay's Luis Suarez was the star of the night, scoring 2 excellent goals in the South American side's 2-1 victory over England. The English side, suffering their second straight defeat, stand on the brink of elimination now, needing Italy to do them a favor to have any chance at all. Suarez is well known to Korean fans here too, as it was his 2 goals in the second round of the 2010 World Cup, which sent Korea packing. Also note that he finished the South American qualification phase for Brazil as a top scorer with 11 goals. England's Wayne Rooney scored his first goal in Brazil in his 3rd World Cup, but an overall lackluster performance from England ensures they stay rooted on 0 points after 2 games. Now, elsewhere in Brazil, Japan and Greece each had chances to win the game, but it finished 0-0, with Greece a man short for most of the match after being sent off. On the other side, Colombia may now focus on their strategy for their round of 16 as they remain atop the group, beating Cote d'Ivoire 2-1. With that said, let's take a look at where the teams stand in their groups a week after the World Cup kicked off. Now back in Iguazu Falls, Team Korea are busy preparing for their second group match. They had a day to recover with kimchi and beef after the Russian match, but they're back in the field now prepping for Algeria, the game they will be looking to win to give them a great shot at getting to the second stage. And they're certainly not short of confidence going into Sunday's match.
The draw against Russia got us a point, and I witnessed how my team gave it their all during those 90 minutes. I'm sure my players will be in even better condition against Algeria.
We've been studying how the Algerian side plays, their positions and characteristics. We are going to monitor their games in even more depth in the coming days.
Team Korea's second match against Algeria kicks off at 4 p.m. Sunday local time. And here's a look at the game scheduled for this Friday and the weekend. That wraps up our World Cup update for this Friday. And do not miss our live coverage of the nationwide cheering for Korea's next game on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend filled with football fever.
Well, we sure will. Thank you, Jisun, for that. Now, Daniel, remember Paul the Octopus? Well, he's the cephalopod which earned fame by picking the winners of games in the 2010 World Cup.
Right, and unfortunately, he has passed away, thankfully, to natural causes.
Right, of old age. But Korea just may have found a replacement. Now, this one is no octopus. In fact, he's a retired top-class footballer who played in a number of World Cup games himself, now providing commentary on matches for a local broadcaster.
I don't know, he could pass for an octopus, the way he handles the dribble and the way he moves his legs. Anyway, our Shin Se-min has more on the former left back who has already earned the moniker Young Podi Octopus.
Paul, the octopus, and the prognosticating turtles of Brazil have nothing on Korean broadcaster Lee Young-pyo. The commentator for Korea Broadcasting System has been accurately predicting the winners and even the scores of this year's World Cup in Brazil. Early on in Korea's match against Russia match this week, Lee, a retired Korean national soccer player, said forward Lee Gun-ho was capable of piercing the Russian defense and added that if Team Korea could hold on until the 70th minutes of the match, a chance would present itself. 68 minutes in and just 12 minutes after stepping onto the pitch for the first time, Lee Gun-ho fired a long-range shot that found its way to the back of the net. But commentator Lee's predictions don't end there. Last month during the World Cup preliminary group stage, he said that the Spanish national team was entering a dark period. That turned out to be an accurate call, as well as the defending champs have already been knocked out from advancing. Lee's prediction for the games and scores between Italy and England and Ivory Coast against Japan also turned out to be right. Lee, an ex-Tottenham Hotspur defender, insisted that his forecasts were hardly lucky guesses, but that hasn't stopped people from referring to him as the next Paul, the Octopus. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life, talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Well, Hyundai Motor has emerged as the best non-luxury auto brand in the United States.
And not only that, just three other brands, three legendary iconic brands performed better than the Korean carmaker in an overall quality survey for 2014 models by a U.S. researcher. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with more.
Hyundai Motor Group has been rated as the #1 automaker among top mainstream brands for making quality cars. In a 2014 survey by U.S. researcher J.D. Power, Hyundai, which includes the Kia brand, beat the likes of General Motors and Toyota in new car quality. Last year's best performer GM fell to third place, pulled down by a massive recall crisis earlier this year. GM is being scrutinized for a slow recall after an internal report showed that engineers engineers knew about a flaw in the ignition switches for more than 10 years. It has recalled a record 20 million vehicles in North America this year after the flaw contributed to 13 deaths. Including luxury brands, Hyundai ranked 4th place in quality ranking after Porsche, Jaguar, and Lexus, up 6 notches from last year. 5 models from Hyundai and Kia were voted as the best performers in 5 vehicle categories in J.D. Power's 2014 survey. They included Hyundai's Genesis, which topped in the mid-size premium car segment. Hyundai's Accent and Elantra won the honor in the small car and compact car segments, respectively. Kia's Sportage and Cadenza ranked the highest in the small SUV and large car segment, and GM's Chevy Malibu was placed first for initial quality in the mid-size car category. The study was based on feedback from more than 86,000 drivers of new vehicles after 90 days of ownership. The study was conducted from November last year to May this year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, in a recent survey, 4 out of every 10 South Korean women thought marriage is just an option and not a requirement, but men said they did not, comply to that. But here's one guy who just soared to fame after having a family of his own. I'm talking about Korean pop star Psy, and he has another hit on his hands. Well, his latest song, Hangover, has made it to 26th on the Billboard Hot 100 list, boosted by the tens of millions of views that its video has racked up since being released nearly 2 weeks ago.
The Billboard honor holds special meaning as it makes Psy the very first Asian entertainer to crack the top 30 with 3 different songs. Gangnam Style and Gentleman also earned that distinction. The world star spoke out about the Billboard ranking on Twitter, thanking his fans.
Well, now it's time to get a recap on the week's domestic headlines.
For that, we have our Yurian.
Good evening. Let's go straight in and take a look at the Joseon-ilbo, which is hosting a bicycle expedition for anyone who wants to trek across Eastern Europe and Asia, and that's to promote peace and cooperation in the region. Now, this follows President Park Geun-hye's comments earlier this year, where she proposed a vision of expanding economic cooperation in Eurasia. Now, this is a 15,000-kilometer ride for 100 days starting in mid-August, and as you can see here on the map, it begins from Berlin to end in Seoul. Now you see Poland, Latvia, and also the Red Square in Moscow, all the places that the bikers will pass through during their trip. Now, staying in the same story, the article here has posted some words of encouragement from key political figures. You see here Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, who says that he hopes a ride can play a leading role in opening up an era of Eurasia and unification. Now, next to him, you see Seoul Mayor Park Won-soo, who also says he applauds the passion of those taking part in the expedition as it raises hope for a peaceful unification of Korea. Now, 3D printing is being billed as the next big thing in the tech world, and the possibilities surrounding the technology just seem endless. The headline here from the Merit Business reads, "Artificial ear fruit-flavored jelly all mine with online blueprint." Now, the paper talks about how anyone can now customize their own products by creating an online blueprint, which when sent to a company makes the products. Now, they've already created a 3D replica of Vincent van Gogh's ear made of living cells, for instance, as you can see here, by using a biological material from a living relative. They've also made edible items like this jelly seen over here. Now, analysts say that accelerating technology could herald in an era of 4D printing, which the paper says can create objects that react to changing external conditions. Tires that transform for a better grip in case of rain or snow are an example of what can be done with 4D printing. Now, that does it for this week's look at some of the eye-catching stories from the Korean press.
You know, almost everyone here in Korea, we're all definitely looking ahead to Team Korea's next World Cup match, which is Monday morning Korea time.
And the game will be held in the southern part of Brazil. So let's turn to our Michelle at the Weather Center for a look at the forecast there. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. It's been really hot and humid over there in Brazil, hampering the players on the field adapting to the new environment. And however, this time the game is held in Porto Alegre, which is usually cooler and less humid than other regions. Now, and as for the weather conditions for Korea, we are expecting some rain tonight all over the nation, totaling between 5 to 20 millimeters, depending on where you are. And we're expecting sudden showers throughout the weekend, as well as into our next week with high daytime highs. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 20 and 27 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 24 and 23 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 22, Dokdo at 20, while Namgungang tops out at 18. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and have a wonderful evening.
Right, Michelle, we hope to be bringing everyone good news from Brazil on Monday, and hopefully we'll have good weather for them as well.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Moon Ganyang. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day, and we hope to greet you with news of a win for Team Korea on Monday. So go Team Korea, show the world what we're made of. Bye-bye.